Good evening and welcome, everyone. My name is the creature from Matt Lagoon,
And I am Count Dracula. Wee, 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 wee.
and welcome to the Creeps in the Kooks Club. uh, since it's the spooky season, we decided to do a special episode dedicated to one of our very, very favorite spooky comic characters, and quite frankly, one of the most iconic heroes of all time, Batman.
Yeah. Truth be told, like in everything else that we're doing for the spooky season, Batman doesn't fit too much. We originally were gonna do something talking about our favorite horror comics, but we kind of covered that in the questions thing, and we were just kind of like, screw it, let's just talk about Batman. Because Batman, he does have some horror aspects to him. He does some overall like spooky stuff, and it just honestly kind of works to talk about him in general. And when done right, Batman can kind of be a horror comic.
He really can be. And if, in all honesty, if there's any superhero out there that exemplifies the good that can come from darkness, that's Batman. Like, I mean, obviously there are other
Yeah.
characters that do this, like Blade or Ghost Rider, but Batman, quite frankly, is like the pinnacle of dark
Mhm.
and kind of broody, but also still lighthearted fun in a similar way that Halloween can be. So, and not to mention, he's also one of the biggest costumes around this time of the year. So, I think it was just fitting to talk about him.
Yeah, either Batman or Harley Quinn or Joker. People are always dressed. Although not a lot of Penguin outfits.
That might
But
change.
um, yeah, I definitely think that just getting into it. I mean, look, Batman has always been one of my favorite superheroes.
Same.
Even before like Superman and all that, I loved Batman. I always was a Batman guy, and I think we need to put respect on him though, and say that Batman was created in the 1930s by Bob Kane
Hmm.
and Bill Finger.
Yes.
Bob Kane needs more respect than Bill Finger gets because, or vice versa. I can't remember which one, but it's basically like the whole thing is that one of them kind of came in and took a lot of the, took a lot of the story, and then the other one just took kind of the credit for it.
I think that might have been Kane because I remember a
It
story
was
that
Kane. You're
Stan.
right. My bad.
I remember a
Yeah.
story Stan Lee told. One day he and Kane went out for dinner one day, and Kane was very talkative with one of the waitresses. He was like, "Don't you reckon? You know who I am? Don't you recognize me? I'm the guy who made Batman. Here, just give me a napkin and I'll draw you a Batman comic or whatever."
Mhm.
And Stan was just there. He's like, "Dude, I don't even brag that much about Spider Man. Like, come on." But yeah,
Yeah.
Bill Finger definitely deserves a lot of credit. But he was created in 1930s, and like Superman and his fellow associates like Wonder Woman and several other characters, he's someone who has gone through a whole lot of changes throughout the last, God, over 80 years, but typically has some core elements maintained across those decades. Like he's always billionaire, playboy philanthropist Bruce Wayne, who lost his parents in Crime Alley at a very young age, which in turn caused him to go around fighting crime at night dressed up as a bat in order to strike fear into the
Yeah.
hearts of the superstitious, cowardly lot that are criminals. And
Yeah.
he's picked a perfect place for it too. Gotham is like the most crime-ridden city in America. Like holy crap. It's like every other day some supervillain is trying to blow it up or some secret society is trying to bring it down. But it's like at a certain point the property taxes in Gotham must be like a crazy discussion. It's like I
Yeah.
can't imagine living there. I'm a Smallville guy myself, so
It is kind of funny that he decided I'm gonna dress up and beat up criminals instead of, I don't know, going to therapy.
therapy is for the
But
weak.
yeah, therapy. Who needs therapy? But he kind of evolved from being like this interesting dark character into being the icon that he is. Like he has become sort of known thanks to Chris Nolan, for being this really grounded and gritty hero who runs around and beats people up and saves Gotham. And it kind of was carried on into the Batman, but he also has some, goofy like qualities to him. Like the Joker started off as a really goofy villain.
Hmm.
Like he legitimately started off as being like, I'm just gonna run around and gas people and maybe poison the water. And then later on down the line, they're like, I'm going to cut my own face off, Batman, and then I'm gonna murder your whole family. It's like, okay, where did that come
I
from?
wonder if that's sort of like a sort of commentary on how cultures have viewed clowns recent years because, like
Man,
I've mentioned in our Halloween questionnaire, clowns aren't particularly scary to me, but they are very scary to a lot of other people. So I'm wondering if that's sort of a commentary on how cultures evolved around clowns because, like he said, he was very silly. And then around the point of like the 80s, he just decided to become very, very intimidating and try to cross a whole lot of lines,
mm,
like when he killed Jason and then got away with
yeah,
it by becoming the ambassador to Iran or whatever. And it's like that's
yeah.
that's like
Okay,
scary
hold on.
and
We
funny.
we do need to mention that because people. Okay, few things about Death in the Family. Death in the Family is a great
Hmm.
comic. It was a great usage. It was really interesting how they went about killing Jason, and we'll get more into like the Robins and everything because the Robins are what make Batman Batman too. We're kind of all over the place right now, but um, here's the thing with Death in the Family. Everybody looks at Death in the Family as like, Batman should just kill Joker. Batman was wrong for letting Jason die. He didn't do anything. That's largely because everyone looks at Under the Red Hood and they don't read the comic. Batman was literally willing to off the Joker. Like he left him to die in a helicopter. Like he was willing to kill the man, and he literally ends it like telling Superman to look for his body to make sure he's dead. Like he was gonna kill the man. But then the other thing is, yeah, Joker literally evades Batman by becoming an ambassador to the Iranian government. He was literally approached by like the leader at the time. Like, there's literally a panel where it has the leader at the time. I'm not gonna try and say his name, approaching him and being like, "Hey, you want to come work for us?" Like, what?
Yeah, that's both scary and silly. So like that whole comic arc is one of those examples of how clowns can be funny but also scary. So
Yeah,
that's just like one enemy though for Batman. Like he's had a whole plethora of the most iconic villains of
mm,
all time in his rogues gallery. He's very similar to Spider-Man and the Flash in that sort of sense because their rogues galleries are often
yeah,
considered as the most interesting, but Batman's is honestly on another level because uh
yeah,
we have the Joker obviously, but we also have people like Penguin, Riddler, uh the Mr. Freeze, Poison Ivy, Two-Face. Those are just off the ones off the top of my head. Croc. My personal favorite is
yeah,
honestly a Baby
yeah,
Doll from the Batman series because she's just so fucking tragic, but it's also kind of silly because she's like just a child and she
yeah,
acts like one and she has some funny moments and some sad moments and then you really feel sympathy and heartache and then at the end when she's just hugging his feet like I didn't mean to, that just gets me every single time and it's
yeah,
like by god that episode was like Emmy award winning material at least. It is like by everyone involved with that entire production deserves a
mm,
fucking Emmy for that episode alone, I'm saying. But
yeah,
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 over the years, his villains have had varying degrees of villainy and sympathy, and it's something that I think is very interesting with every new depiction because when we get new
mm,
versions of the Joker, people can roll their eyes because it's been done. But I try to keep myself open minded because I want to see what they do with him. I want to see what each person brings to their table,
yeah.
and we've had some good and some bad, but I think this is a character who's going to be around for a long time, so I want to see what people are going to do with him.
Yeah, and like on the villains, Batman, he has some of the most interesting villains because of how they're able to like utilize and use him. Because each villain can be written differently. Like my favorite Batman villain is by far Mr. Freeze. I love fucking Mr. Freeze because of how he's portrayed, because how he's done. Before the animated series, though, he was kind of a goofy guy.
Yeah, he was just
he
a guy with
didn't
a freeze ray.
yeah, he didn't really have much development. He didn't really have much to him. But then the animated series did a great job of really fleshing out his character and making it where he had Nora, who was dying, and he originally he was a guy named Mister Zero, who was a mad scientist with no name, and then he was renamed Mister Freeze after the '66 show.
Hmm.
But then in '92, with the animated series, they renamed him for Victor Freeze, which is on the nose. And they ended up having him be this tragic guy whose wife is dying, and he freezes her, but in the same time, he loses all of his emotion. He loses everything that made him who he was, and it's so beautiful and so tragic. And I just love how they develop him over the years.
It would move me to tears if I still had tears to shed.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
exactly. Like he's just such a great villain, and he has some great lines too. It's just you can't top Batman villains. Like we talked about Spider Man and how much we love Spider Man, but Mr. Freeze has some great, really emotional, fantastic lines like "What killed the dinosaurs? The
the
Ice
Ice
Age."
Age. Ah. Yes. That's a
Who body?
that's a sort of like a transitional period for Batman because here's the thing. For a while, Batman was kind of associated with kind of silly kids fun, and that's large in part to the 66 Adam West show. And don't get us wrong, that we love the I love the 66 show. I don't know how Drew feels about
Yeah,
it.
I've never really seen it. I'm not
But
like Adam West. Adam West was a great Batman. Let's be honest here. Adam West.
yes.
I feel like just going through him. Adam West was a great Batman. Keaton set the tone for Batman from '88 on for being this grim, gritty hero. Val Kilmer was all right, I guess. Then there was
Okay.
Clooney, and then there was Christian Bale was really good, and then Ben Affleck is Ben Affleck, and then you have Pattinson. So he definitely has different interpretations over the years, but he definitely can be goofy and silly when he wants to be.
Yeah.
But then other times, yeah,
Yeah, it's like with the 60 show, that sort of left an image and it sort of haunted Adam West throughout a good chunk of his career and which is a conflict that actually became a Batman episode
mhm,
in the animated series with Kevin Conroy and that was one of my favorite episodes too with the shadow of the gray
yeah,
ghost. Uh
yeah,
it's like it that sort of silliness sort of carried up until the Tim Burton movie with Keaton, and that sort of brought the grim grittiness aspect into the limelight, which in turn more people grabbed onto. Because here's the thing with Batman, people love him more when he's a relatable, very flawed human, and less than the perfect paragon of detectiveness and world's greatest detective and all that. That's sort of what Adam West represented. He's a good role model for children, but a lot of people really identify with Batman on a personal level when he's flawed, when he's human, when he's grim and gritty, when he's not this paragon
mhm,
of fortitude or anything like that, but someone who has a whole lot of internal struggles. So
yeah,
that sort of thing was exemplified in the 89 movie, and granted that has its own issues because he still uses guns, I think, but here's that's a
mhm,
thing that people really don't like. Really don't like Batman using guns. He did in the original comics, and we know this, but nonetheless it's like it's something that is just it feels wrong nowadays when that happens,
yeah,
when Batman uses a gun either on his Batmobile or just a handheld weapon. It just kind of feels off. But I think that's sort of how the character
yeah.
has evolved. But I think that the grim and gritty aspect was personally perfected in the 90s series with Kevin Conroy, and I don't think
Mhm.
anyone here is here to argue that.
No, no. Kevin Conroy definitely set the tone for Batman. Like we can say that Michael Keaton did a great
He
job,
did.
and he definitely did. But let's be honest, Michael Keaton was killing his villains too. There's literally a scene where he straps a bomb to a guy, smiles at him, and then lets him blow up. And he was literally trying to kill the Penguin and trying to kill the Joker. Like, even though you wouldn't hit a guy with glasses, would you? He was still trying to
Yep.
do it. And Kevin Conroy's Batman though in the Batman animated series, and why I love Mr. Freeze is because of that show. Because Mr. Freeze was goofy and silly, and then all of a sudden the animated show they're busting out lines like, "Think of it, Batman, to never again walk on a summer's day with the hot wind in your face and a warm hand to hold. Oh yes, I'd kill for that." Like holy shit, like that makes the villain not only like relatable but also interesting. But Kevin Conroy in general had the voice for Batman. He had the ability to convey this dark, grim character who also had the time for emotion, who had the time to care for his villains. And that is something else too that sets Batman apart from a lot of interpretations. A lot of people look at Batman and they say, "Oh, he's a guy who's just going to run around and beat up the mentally ill. He doesn't care. He doesn't care about them. He doesn't care about his wards. He doesn't care about the Robins. He uses them as soldiers." Frank
Yep.
Miller. um, but when Batman is done right, like no offense to Frank Miller, The Dark Knight Rises, fantastic, or Returns, fantastic. But what that kind of left the impact on and led into Batman and Robin, not so good, not so good.
No.
But Batman cares. he's just a broken. At the end of the day, Batman is a broken child. He has never truly repaired the damage of his life, but he is trying. He's trying to move on, he's trying to move forward, but it's hard for him to do. He's stuck in the cycle of being this caped crusader who's running around and beating up criminals, but also is trying to find the time to care and to ground himself. And that's when Batman is so good. Like, we've said this many, many, many times before because of OSP, and this is a quote I love, but one of the best scenes of Batman from the Kevin Conroy era in Justice League Unlimited is when the kid Ace is dying. Ace is like a telepath. They're able to change reality basically, but they're dying. If they die, there's a chance that they might destroy everything when they have a massive embolism. And the only way to take them out before that embolism happens is to kill them. So Batman volunteers. He goes in there to go take out Ace, but instead of killing her, he sits with her and he comforts her until her time comes. And that
Yep,
is Batman. If your Batman can't comfort, and we said this in Cape Crusader, but if your Batman can't comfort a dying child, that's not Batman. That's Punisher with a funny hat.
it's true. And
Yeah.
to anyone who says Batman doesn't care, Batman can help a whole lot when a villain is trying to redeem themselves. Because I've known
Hmm.
stories where he gives some villains like jobs in his corporation. Because yes, he is a billionaire, but he is someone who cares a lot about his city and cares a lot about its development and its people. So whenever he knows that a villain is trying to redeem themselves, sometimes he can give them work, sometimes he could give them the space they need to heal. He can provide them with therapists. Batman can pretend to be as grim and broody and above the struggles of the common man as he wants, but at the end of the day, he's someone who cares a whole lot.
Hmm.
Cape Crusader sort of emphasized this by showing uh, a Batman that tries to come across as uncaring, but ultimately just cares too much. Like he bleeds through, like his care bleeds through, especially at the end. Um,
Yeah.
and I think again, the 90s series was one that just exemplified a Batman who cares so well. And
Yeah.
I don't think anyone can argue that. But another option that I think was really good was Brave and the Bold, the
Hmm.
series with uh, Diedrich Bader as Batman, among others. And it sort of emphasized his relationships and dynamics with his fellow heroes above all else, because many heroes can respect and admire him, some don't. And we just sort of see him working off those people and building teams and trust and all that. And that's obviously a very silly show too. But it's not totally silly, you know. It has a whole lot of
Hmm.
seriousness. Like uh, the Christmas episode alone goes over how Bruce was a spoiled brat up until the moment his parents died, and he lives and carries with that regret, you know. And uh, there is the Chill in the Night episode, which basically covered, which kind of was like a comic recreation, because I think that happened in the comics, where he found out Joe Chill was back and doing his own business, and he decides to take him down, and he's conflicted with the idea of killing him. And that in
Hmm.
turn is very dramatic, it's very intense, and I think Bader himself did a good job with the voice acting. And not to mention, we
Hmm.
had Spectre and the the other guy, I forget his name. But basically,
Phantom
Phantom
Stranger.
Stranger, yeah, Phantom Stranger and the
Yeah.
Spectre, who were voiced by Mark Hamill and Kevin Conroy, who were sort of serving as his angel and devil on the shoulder, trying to convince him to either stay good or not. And ultimately, he chooses
Hmm.
to be Batman and not kill Joe, but sort of just
Hmm.
B still dies anyway. But nonetheless, it's not his fault. Uh,
No.
and it just that episode alone sums up so much of Batman, and not to mention, but it still has plenty of silly moments too, like an entire musical episode with Neil Patrick Harris as the brand new villain Music Meister, which
Yeah.
you have no idea how obsessed I was with that
Yeah.
episode as a kid. You have no idea.
The hammers of justice are unisex. That's I love that line. That's such a good line. Like, you wouldn't hit a woman, would you, Batman?
The
The
images of
hammers of
justice are
justice are
unisex.
unisex. Like, that's it's like you were saying. It does a good job of being a combination of the '66 show and the '90s show,
Hmm.
of combining like the goofy, over the top aspects, and also having other heroes. Like that was a big thing of it. Like we're gonna have other heroes cameo and be a part of it, like Aquaman actually being a fun Aquaman and having some really good
The
moments,
best
but
Aquaman, in
then
my opinion.
also yeah, but then also having like the dark and heavy moments that they were able to couple in with it, and also breaking the fourth wall a lot, and literally going back in time to stop John Wilkes Booth from killing Abraham Lincoln. That's canon. Um, but something that I love, and I again, it speaks on Batman being caring because yeah, Batman can run around, he can break bones, he can beat people up, but at the end of the day, he cares. So that's basically the point we're making. But there's two comics. There's a bunch of comics that come to mind when I think of that. There was one that came out recently by Chip Zdarsky. It was Batman 150. It's a part of his run, and it's called. It basically the issue is called "Be Better," and it basically is a story about a criminal who found out that Bruce Wayne is Batman. He knows that he is, and he's trying to sell the information, but nobody wants it. And it's basically just a story, a collection of like little stories from different people talking about Batman and how, like, yeah, he's running around, he's beating people up, but then he takes the time to help them. He takes the time to save them. He takes the time to be there for them. And it gets to the point where the guy ends up being confronted by his own son, who tells him, this guy was like a henchman, and his son tells him, I was going to follow in your footsteps. I went to work for Scarecrow, but then I got dosed with this fear toxin, and Batman found me, and he helped me. And literally, the message is he says, be better. Be better than this. Be better than me. Be better than anything. And that is Batman. The other one comes from one of my favorite Batman comics of all time. Peter J. Tomasi and Patrick Gleason, Batman and Robin, Born to
Hmm.
Kill. It basically is taking the story of Damian Wayne and kind of creating it where he is becoming Robin. He's becoming Batman's Robin. He's becoming, he is Batman's son, but he's also raised as to be an assassin. He's raised to kill. And what does that mean for him? Does he keep being a killer, or does he become a hero? Does he become a Robin? And it has some great moments. Nobody is this basically the son of Henry Ducard, who is targeting Batman and trying to erase him for reasons that he's insane and that he feels like Batman did the same to him. And it leads to this moment where nobody has Damian, and he's getting ready to kill him, and he's torturing him over the radio for Batman to hear. Batman's like a little bat pod, and nobody's in a ship going out to sea. So Batman just casually drives the pod off of a bridge into the boat to get to Damian faster, and literally climbs out of the bat pod, and it's this great, like, shadow of him just standing there menacing, going, "You think you can kill my son and expect to live?" Like, that's
Hmm.
Batman. He cares, but it doesn't always get shown.
Yeah, and some of my I've mentioned before with Ben Affleck's version, I didn't like how they sort of started off in Dark Knight Returns mindset or aesthetic, where he's a lot less caring. He's a lot more ruthless and vicious with his criminals. I didn't like that because I've mentioned before that's not a starting point for Batman. That's a progression point. That is something that uh, someone needs to push Batman too, but we haven't seen that. We just met this Batman. We would need an entire Death in the Family style movie to show Batman reaching this point. So, Death in the Family was the what would eventually lead to Dark Knight Returns at the time, because they were in like the 80s, I think. But at that time, Batman was just pushed to his limit. After Jason was killed, he lost hope. He lost the very faith that kept him going in his own mission. So he decides to retire. And when he comes back, he's a lot more intense. He's a lot more brutal. He still uses rubber bullets. He doesn't kill people, but he is still aggressive. Like, people can argue that Batman did kill people in Dark Knight Returns, but other people can argue that he didn't. So I really don't get the idea that this is like the darkest Batman. The darkest one comes from All Star, which is yeah, yes. Also, it's such a shame because Frank Morrison was able to do Grant Morrison. I meant they were able to do All Star Superman very very well. That Superman was so good. It's kind of like a default Superman in people's eyes. But then we have Frank Miller doing All Star Batman and Robin, and that is like what everyone considers to be the anti Batman and Robin, because it is he is very much abusive. He's loud. He's perverted. He doesn't really seem to care about anything other than just going around beating people up. This is the stereotypical image of Batman that a lot of people like to point out their dislike of the character. But as people who know Batman, we're able to understand this is just a bad adaptation. That's exactly what it is. So um, I really enjoyed Dark Knight Returns, and I love the seeing him progress and return to what he's supposed to be, as well as just getting faith in the mission, because it feels like that's the dark. That's where Batman should be, dark and gritty, and very scary for a lot of criminals, but something that. But someone that ultimately represents a force for good, it represents a force for hope and justice. So, but not being too aggressive and straight up calling Robins the R word or hitting them or banging Black Canary because that's like no, no, or whoever he banged in that one. It's like come on. At a certain point,
What's it
like
like?
you just got to stop.
I'm the goddamn Batman. Um, but yeah, and I mean, it's a disservice to him and a disservice to how he can be portrayed and what they can do with him. Because yeah, Batman can. I mean, this is what we're saying. Batman can be grim. Batman can be gritty. Batman can be intense. But these are his kids. Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, Tim Drake, Damian Wayne, Duke Thomas, Cassandra Cain, Stephanie Brown, Barbara Gordon. All of those are his kids. He cares for them in his own way. Although Duke Thomas gets overlooked a lot, and a lot of people have a problem with that. But he looks after
Hmm.
them and he supports them and he's there for them. He's not always there mentally, but he's there for them. And that's why Robins are so great too. That's why you can't have Batman without Robin. Because while Batman's meant to be the darkness, the Robins are always meant to be the light side. They're meant to represent Batman can be something more. He can be this. He can be like us. He's not going to wear the leotards and the fancy suits and everything, but he's going to be brighter if he has us with him because we'll be, cracking the jokes and making fun, and he can be the brooding guy. And I mean, beyond the fact that Dick Grayson also has a dumpy, it just I mean that's what everyone knows.
Hey.
Dick Grayson for. They're like Dick Grayson got that ass. He got them cheeks. Um, but I just think that is when Frank Miller was like, I'm gonna make Batman abusive. It's like no. And there's a debate about whether Batman killed the Joker in Dark Knight Returns, and he did not. He got close to.
He
He
killed
got
himself.
very close to doing it, but Joker snapped his own neck. Um,
Yeah, and there's a bit of a debate about whether he killed Joker in The Killing Joke too, but he
no.
also did not there, because there have been comics that showed Barbara paralyzed and the Joker was fine afterwards. So in continuity, Batman didn't kill Joker in The
Yeah.
Killing Joke.
The,
So
I
yeah,
always imagine, and someone pointed this out, and I can't stop like seeing it. That instead of like the Joker like dying when Batman is the only one laughing, Joker's just like staring at him like, dude, it's not that funny.
yeah,
Like he just stops laughing and he's just like staring at him dead face, like, man, it's not that funny. And it's also like raises the debate of everyone be like, oh, Batman should kill the Joker, Batman should off the Joker. I'm gonna say no, Batman should not kill the Joker. Not because he can't, because he could, but because Alfred Pennyworth should be the one to kill the Joker.
yes, Alfred should.
Alfred, yeah, Alfred does not have a no kill rule. Let's make that honest right off the bat. Alfred is just as much as a badass as the Robins and Batman because he literally is like, I don't give a shit. I'm just gonna shoot everybody. There's literally a sequence where he has a dream where he shoots the Joker's head off and he just smiles and rolls over. Like that's Alfred. That's a badass. So
Yeah, honest to God, wonder where Batman got his no kill ideology from because he spent his entire life being raised by a spy who doesn't give a fuck about killing.
yeah.
He will kill without hesitation. So,
Hmm.
did he serve in like Her Majesty's Army? Yeah, he was in
He
the
did.
English
He did.
military.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he has no issue whatever about killing. So it's like I'm wondering where Batman got this no kill rule. But I agree, like one of the cores of Batman is that he's always rides the line between hero and villainy, and for him, villainy or even anti-heroism, the line is drawn with killing. So if
Mhm.
he crosses that line, it's not something that he can ever come back from. So I admire and
Yeah.
appreciate that. And it even it's like something strange. I even respect it even more when he chooses to cross that line for the safety of the rest of the world because of um uh, and this is going to sound weird. There was a spin-off or like a what if of Injustice where all the stuff happened. Joker killed Superman's wife or and whatever, got Superman to cause a lot of trouble. But instead, Batman was able to get to the Joker before or Superman was able to intervene and kill him. And Batman recognized, hey, you crossed a line. Superman could kill you, and if he does, then if Superman crosses that line, then he's gonna cause a whole lot more trouble. So you know what? Sorry, Joker, I'm gonna cross that line, and he kills him. So that's
Yeah.
sort of like betraying his own morals, but for the good of the world, and that's something that I can respect. Because that in turn stops
Yeah.
evil Superman, and that makes me very happy. Because the less evil Superman, the better.
Oh yeah. No, yeah. To clarify, so I know exactly what you're talking about. So that was it wasn't like a what if. So basically, in the Injustice world, Superman goes evil, but in order to stop him, Batman uses magic to put him into like a dream where none of
Oh,
injustice
okay.
happened. Like basically, yeah, it doesn't work, and that's where I have a problem with the Injustice comics is that it just keeps like repeating over and over. Oh, we're gonna win. No, we didn't. Oh, we're gonna win. No, we didn't. But for what they were doing with it, and like, yeah, Batman, when he realizes that there's no turning back, he'll do something. But he's not a killer. He's not gonna kill, unless it's absolutely necessary. The funny thing too about Injustice and about a lot of alternate Batman worlds, and this is going back to Alfred real quick. Every other universe, Alfred becomes an absolute badass because he already is a badass in the main universe, but then in other worlds, he just like goes beast mode.
Hmm.
Like in Injustice, he literally takes a pill and headbutts Superman and like beats his ass into the ground. And then in Deceased, he becomes the Spectre. He becomes the spirit of vengeance when everyone else dies around him. And then most recently in DC versus Vampires World War V or whatever it's called, he becomes a Green
Yeah.
Lantern. It's just like no one can keep Alfred down.
And the best part is, it is not hard to envision any of these scenarios being real in the mainline timeline. Like I could easily see Alfred
Well,
becoming a Green Lantern if he wasn't already dead, but that's neither here nor there.
yeah.
Uh, the
Yeah,
yeah,
that's oh boy, we'll need to talk about that.
but
Keep
yeah,
going,
I
keep
could
going.
see him becoming a Green Lantern or becoming the Spectre. I could see him doing that because he's Alfred and he's the best. But to go back
Mhm.
to the Robins and his extended family, we have the Robins, we have Spoiler, we have what was Duke's name again? Justice, something like that.
What?
Duke's name,
What?
Duke
Oh,
Spotlight,
Spotlight,
Spotlight.
Spotlight.
That's right.
Search. Wait, hold
Searchlight,
on.
maybe.
Keep talking. I think it was Searchlight or Spotlight. I'm looking.
Oh,
Signal. The
Signal,
Signal. My bad.
Signal. Okay, he's very recent. I haven't had a whole lot of exposure with him. I'm sorry.
He's pretty new too. He just came about in the New 52 Batman comics, and he really only became a Robin in 2015 before becoming an official member in 2016.
Yeah, so all of them, and like I said, spoiler, and I like spoiler. Sue me. Uh, all of them,
Spoilers
all of
good.
them, sort of represent the potential good that Batman was supposed to be. Bruce went off and he started his mission. He had a whole lot of noble intentions, and he was hoping that his work would spread, or maybe like it would have a positive influence on the rest of the world. And I feel like his family is an example of that because with Robin,
Hmm.
especially with Dick Grayson, became so at one point disillusioned by Batman and just sort of wanted to enact positive change in his own way. So that in turn led him to become Nightwing. Nightwing in turn is like one of my
Hmm.
all-time favorite comic book characters, like he always has been and he always will be. It's like when you inspire that kind of change, I feel like Batman is really working. I feel like even if
Yeah.
he had to cross a line with his adopted son, you know, it's like I just really
Hmm.
respect that. And all the other Robins are really good and really fun in their own way. Jason Todd, obviously, he was really hurt by the Joker, and then he came back. He was killed, and then he came back, and he was sort of hurt by the idea that Batman would let Joker live, so he becomes sort of a Punisher style vigilante, goes around, he hurts people that he knows are a lot worse than the villains that Batman faces, like drug lords and black masks. He tries to keep them in line. And
Hmm.
of course, we have we have Tim and Stephanie Brown. By the way, can we get those two back together? Like, I know Tim has a boyfriend now, but and
Yeah,
that's fine. But like, Tim and Stephanie really worked well together. Like, they just made each other feel so much more complete. You know?
yeah. Nothing against what they ended up doing with Tim, but they were a better couple. I don't even know
Yeah,
the
me
name of
neither.
his
And
boyfriend.
that's the part of the problem. It's like, and
Yeah.
I love them.
Well, they just
I say I love
go
them.
ahead.
I
Sorry.
don't mind Tim being bi, obviously, or even Tim just being full on gay.
Mm-mm.
But I just like the way that these two work together, and I love their interactions. I especially love them in the rebirth era of Detective Comics, where they were part of the team, and they had this whole tragedy with Tim. And there's a simple moment where uh, Bruce just finds Stephanie and he sees like Tim's acceptance letter, and then they just hug and they feel really sad, and that's something that's really impactful. You know, I don't really think that I don't really know if that's
Yeah.
something that can be recreated with Tim's new boyfriend. That's all I'll say. But I could be wrong though. Maybe they have, or maybe they will. I don't know. That's just the main thing. But yeah,
Yeah.
again, they are all fun in their own way, and uh, it's good to see them grow and interact with each other and just be influenced by Batman, but also be just inspired to do the right thing, just because for the same reason Batman does, just because it's the right thing to do, and that's something that I very much enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it kind of goes like this. Dick was the first one. He was the lighter one. He was the brightest one. In the sense that he was always cracking jokes. Jason was, he started off light and happy, but then he kind of became grim and brutal in a sense because of being Batman. Also, I think we have to mention too that when Jason Todd started off as the Red Hood, he was not an anti-hero vigilante. He was a
He
straight up
was.
crime lord. And everyone seems to like gloss over and miss that. Like it wasn't until like New 52 that he became like a hero. And it's also funny that Winter Soldier and Batman Red Hood or Under the Red Hood came
Hmm.
out in the same year, which is crazy to think about. Um but the other thing too is like, that happened with him, and then you had
Yeah. Ugh.
Outlaws, which the Rebirth Outlaws is not bad, but the other Outlaws is eesh. Um and then you go on from that into Tim Drake, who was the smart one. He's probably one of the best Robins. He was, he figured out Bruce Wayne was Batman. He came to Bruce when he was mourning the loss of Jason and was in a dark place. And then after him, you had Stephanie and Cassandra Cain, who were also great Robins. And then, Robin, spoiler, Orphan. They have a whole bunch of names. It's hard to keep track of. Um, and then you also had Damien and Duke. Like there's a lot. Like the Bat family is one of the best families in fiction, and it just works so well when they come together and when
I
they're
know
great
Damien
heroes.
is a bit controversial, but honestly, I really like Damien. Like, I don't like adaptations of him that portray him as just sort of a "Ugh, I'm better than you" kind of brat and just kind of keep him there. But I do
Mm,
like the version of him that's allowed to grow and develop. And in the comics, yeah, he's very much developed as his own person. And he recently had an arc where he hunted down Bane on Dinosaur Island in the uh, Batman and Robin line by Joshua Williamson. Also, love Joshua Williamson. He
mm,
writes his characters very well. But he hunted Bane down because Bane killed
mm,
Alfred at one point in the past, and for a while they didn't really do a whole lot with that. But here they got to explore Damien's feelings on the situation and how he's grown and changed over the years, literally having flashbacks marked by and titled by the era they took place in, like Rebirth or during the Dark
mm,
Arc Crisis or
yeah,
whatever. And it's like
yeah,
seeing that progression and seeing him grow, and seeing the results of that, that's something that was so very much grateful for, because as a Damien fan, it feels like sometimes it's a losing battle because nobody seems to care beyond the snobby brat portrayal. But he's he got to show here how he's grown and he had a real chance to shine when he had the opportunity to kill Bane but chose not to, and then he gets jacked up on Bane serum, which, yeah, it's a very funny image. It's hilarious. That made me laugh out loud so much, and it was just such a good arc. I
yeah.
really appreciated it.
Yeah. I mean, so here's the whole thing with Damien. and what has happened to him in recent years. So I loved him in Born to Kill and Peter J. Tomasi's run. He did
Yep.
a great job of characterizing him and utilizing him, probably more so than how Grant Morrison used him, because no offense to Grant Morrison, but there were always some issues people had with his portrayal of Talia and how he used Damien. And I always
They
thought that how he used, like, look, let me put it like this. Damien dies at one point in Morrison's run. And then Tomasi makes a point that, like, Batman, there's a beautiful comic called Requiem where there's no words. It's just Batman going out and fighting crime, but he's alone. And then it ends with him, like, tearfully breaking down and punching everything because Damien's dead. And it's just like, it shows the emotional side of him. He makes a point of going to fucking Apocalypse to get Damien's body back, beating up so many people, beating up, oh, his name. What's the name of Darkseid's? Like,
Desaad,
what's his name? Shoot. Not Orion.
Either Desaad or
Sorry,
Caliban.
Caliban. Wait, is this Caliban?
Calabac, yes.
Calabac. Um, he makes a point of, like, fighting Calabac and beating him up, and then motherfucking Darkseid shows up and he beats his ass just to get his son and to take him home. He's literally like, Darkseid, like, laser cyborgs there to help with boom tooms and stuff, and Batman just looks at him in a mech suit and he's like, took you long enough. And he, like, just beats his ass down to take Damian home. It's amazing. But the other thing is that during the Rebirth era, Tom King took over writing for Batman, and he didn't do a terrible job. He legitimately had some decent runs, and he had some good stuff going for it. But the biggest thing was just that he had a habit, and he has a really bad habit of, like, decompressing things, or, like, taking a really long time to get points across, or making, like, really flowery dialogue that doesn't really make any sense. And he made a really big point of, like, bat and cat, bat and cat. The biggest thing too was that he had a huge arc called City of Bane, where Bane, who is, I know I said Mr. Freeze was one of my favorite, Bane is also one of my favorite Batman villains. I love that guy because he's smarter than everyone thinks he is. He takes over the city, and literally in one panel, in a random third issue, he snaps Alfred's neck.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. He snapped his neck in front of Damien, and then they just moved on. And they didn't talk about it for like 6 issues. And then when they finally talked about it, it was glossed over and barely mentioned. And then for the next couple of years, Damien was just sort of like this angry brat running around, beating up criminals, doing all this crazy shit because Alfred was dead. It wasn't until Joshua Williamson came in and took over and did a solo Robin series that it actually worked, and that he was able to show the emotional side and develop Damien in a really interesting way. I mean, that's also kind of debatable, but yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Or Phantasm.
or uh, who else does he really date? See, that's just my point. I can't even think of a lot of
Yeah,
people
I
that
mean
Batman
the
dates.
Phantasm.
Phantasm, yes, Phantasm was amazing. Yes, that's a
Yeah,
different story entirely. But even that was just sort of undone by one personality or another, and
yeah.
or it's funny how Batman is known for having so many girlfriends, and yet right now I can't even think of a whole lot of them. So
Yeah, well, they're mainly like one-offs, and the thing with Catwoman too is that she was perfect for Batman. It works. It's the knight and the thief. You know, they are yin and yang in a sense, and they were
yeah,
supposed to be married in Tom King's run,
yeah,
and then he kind of just dropped the ball there and was like, no. I feel like I'm going to take the second to talk about Tom King because there are some writers who take Batman and redefine him and do a great job with him, and one of those writers was Scott Snyder. He took Batman during the New 52 run and completely like changed him. He did a great job with him. He introduced a Court of Owls. He made it sort of a horror comic in a sense in some aspects. It was really good. Tom King wasn't bad. It just was like his run sort of ran its course, and then he kept getting the chance to do Batman comics and one shots and everything, and it just was like, why? He did one called Batman Killing Time, where the whole point was they were trying to get some eye or something for some convoluted reason, and like it was Batman, Catwoman, Riddler, Penguin, some new villain OC character called the Help, and then also like FBI agent who could literally only swear. That was her only, characteristic. She swears. That was it. And then for some fucking reason, fucking Clock King shows up at the end. Is like, this was all my plan. I am the king of all of this. I'm in charge. And it was like, what the fuck? But yeah, that's on Tom King and how he does Batman. Although I will say he did redefine Kite Man
Kite Man, hell
for the
yeah,
DC universe. Yeah, the funny thing is everyone looks at Kite Man and like, oh, Kite Man's funny. Kite Man, hell yeah. Um, he's actually incredibly tragic
yeah,
because he says hell yeah because he was told when he was a kid that if he says hell, he'll go to hell. Um, and he has a son who, during this whole, there was a war of jokes and riddles that happened between Joker and Riddler. He got roped into it. Riddler poisons his son and kills him.
hmm
And his son said hell. So now, Kite Man believes he's going to go to hell. So now, every single time, he makes a point of saying hell yeah, so he can see his son again, which is really depressing, but also funny, in a dark way.
yeah. That's a very tragic moment there. But you know what?
Hmm.
I just realized this is supposed to be a Halloween issue. Maybe we should talk about Long Halloween. Long,
Yes. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I can't believe I forgot about that.
yes, Long Halloween is one of Batman's best runs, best stories. As uh, I can't talk right now, which is ironic since I'm a podcast host, but that's neither here nor there. Batman Long
So
Halloween was done by Jeff
go
Webb and
ahead.
Tim Sale. It is basically like one of the default Batman stories. It's like a whole lot of other superheroes. They have specific stories that are more meaningful for them. Like they can't be interchanged with anyone else. But this story highlighted his detective aspect. It highlighted the city he lives in. It highlighted his villains. It highlighted himself. This is just a story that I can't associate with anyone else. So Long Halloween, definitely one of my favorite Batman stories.
Yeah, I love the Long Halloween. Long Halloween will go down as one of my favorite Batman stories of all time. It's up there with some of the other ones as well, but that was just it changed the game. It's a great detective story, and it's also a great it's a great Commissioner Gordon story. It's not just a Batman story. It takes Commissioner Gordon and it utilizes him in such a good way. It does a great job of fleshing him out and utilizing him and making him a big part of the story. And then at the same time, it does a really good job of allowing for Two Face to have a great origin as well. And then the whole story, it also made Calendar Man into a really creepy, psychopathic kind of villain, too. But it just did a great job of fleshing out Harvey Dent's character and eventually turning him into Two Face. In a lot of ways, it was in the vein of the animated show, where it also redefined Two Face and made him into who he was. But what I love about it is just the mystery behind it. It's the story of Holiday and who is Holiday, who's going around killing the Falcone family, and who is doing this. And it turns out that It may have been Alberto. It may have been Gilda Dent. It may have been Harvey Dent. It's a great mystery, and they're actually following it up with the well. They followed it up with Dark Victory, which explored Dick Grayson and Batman's relationship, and now they're finally going to be following it up with a final one that's going to be a tribute to the artist Tim Sale, called Batman: The Last Halloween.
Yeah, and obviously it might not hit the same way with Tim Sale without Tim Sale because honest to God, Tim Sale's art is some of the best that I have ever seen.
Yeah.
Like just seeing Joker's grin, like it almost reaches hairline. It's honest to God very scary in a certain way because I mentioned clowns aren't scary. Joker can be very very scary sometimes, especially when he cuts off his own face. But
Yeah.
that's neither here nor there. Uh,
Yeah.
and it people uh, basically say that this is sort of a blueprint for how a lot of the movies went, especially with Dark Knight and the Batman. And that's true in some ways, but I still can't feel like we haven't had like a perfect adaptation of this story. And I think
Right.
uh, we could in the future, but I do very much appreciate the original comic, and I obviously love the attempts that they've made. The Batman and Dark Knight especially were very very well done in their own rights, and I'm glad that Long Halloween is getting a lot of the credit for that,
Hmm.
especially with Two Face, because yeah, in the animated
Yeah.
series there's one scene that always gets me in the Two Face arc. It's where it happens in a dream. Because we've explored Harvey Dent so much by this point in the show, it makes his turn all the more tragic. And so at one point, Bruce has a dream about Harvey, his friend, feeling betrayed. He's hurt. He's obviously not the same person that he used to be. And so at a certain point, he comes across a bridge and falls into a pit of fire. And he just says, "Why couldn't you save me?" And then
Yeah.
Batman looks down and he just sees a shocked look. And we you just see his parents standing under a light, and his father just says, "Why couldn't you save us, son?" And then Batman wakes up, and
Yeah.
it's like, Jesus H Christ, that is sad. It's like
Hmm.
it's like how how can you really top that? To be honest, like how could we really top that at all? And I can't help but feel like
Yeah.
when did when did Long Halloween come out? 96, 98.
It was like the '90s, I believe. Hold on.
I'm wondering if the show had a sort of impact on that.
It might have. Nope, that's the anime. Nope, there we go. Come on, come on. 1996 to 1997.
Okay, so yeah, the '90s series was in '92, I think. So, or
Hmm.
'94. But yeah, I'm wondering if the show had any influence there. It might have, it might not have,
It might have had a little bit.
for right now, I will definitely say Long Halloween, one of the best comics out there for Batman.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
It also no, no, it also had a did a. It really is one of the best Batman comics out there. It also did a really good job of developing and fleshing out Batman's root gallery. Because like each issue, you had a different villain show up. You had Poison Ivy, you had Catwoman, you had Two Face, you had Joker, you had Penguin, I think. Oh, that was more Dark Victory. You had Solomon Grundy. They each would just show up in a different issue and something like that.
It's funny because
And it definitely was inspiration for the Dark Knight, and it was also inspiration for the Batman. Also, this year Halloween is on a Thursday, so you know what
there's
that means.
something in the
Thursday,
way.
October 31st.
Mhm.
It means that the Batman is
Yeah,
coming to pass. But yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, Batman is Batman, and the Long Halloween is the definitive version of him for sure.
yeah, and it's funny that Grundy is even in this issue because he's Superman's enemy, so he didn't even need to. They could have used Croc if they wanted, but no, they chose Grundy, and I'm grateful for it. uh,
I mean, I always thought
or
Grundy.
maybe Grundy's like a
No, no,
general
yeah.
villain. I don't know.
Yeah, he's kind of a general. I mean, he's known to fight Superman a decent amount. He's also known to largely fight like the Justice
Yes, that's true.
Society and Swamp Thing.
That makes
So
sense. But yeah, I think we've covered basically everything. We covered his rogues gallery. We covered
yeah,
his family. We've covered some of his best arcs. What we I know that this episode wasn't about anything particularly that scary, but Batman as a figure is someone who emphasizes that just because something is dark and gritty doesn't mean it has to be evil. It's something that represent. He's someone who represents that hope and justice can come from dark places, and how we in turn can come back from our darkest moments. So I
Yeah.
absolutely love Batman, and I want to know in the comments if your platform that you're listening on has comments. Let us know what your favorite Batman stories are, because I definitely want to hear. And I want to hear how
Yeah.
Batman or any of his characters or if his stories, if they've impacted you at all growing up or as an adult. So
Hmm.
definitely let us know.
Yeah, and we definitely covered, like Matt was saying, we've covered everything. We've gone over everything. Batman has definitely left an impact on all of us, and Batman will always leave an impact on people. He's going to be around for a good long while, hopefully, and hopefully they can keep using him right and keep using him well.
So, in summation, thank you so much for joining us, and long live the Dark Knight. I'm
I'm
Batman.
Batman. I live in the shadows for justice, for Gotham. Anyway, uh,
Good
so
night.
long, everyone. Have a good night.